this meeting of the Personnel and Animal Welfare Committee to order. And without objections, we're going to make item 3 and item 9 consent items, and continue item number 2 to our next meeting due to city attorney concerns. So without objection, we will start with item number 1.
Item number 1, communication from the mayor relative to the appointment of Dr. Rosalinda Lugo to the Employee Relations Board for the term ending September 23rd, 2018.
And if we could ask our nominee and perhaps a representative from the mayor's office to join us.
Morning, Councilmember. For the record, Rich Llewellyn from the Mayor's Office.
And I'm Rosalinda Lugo.
Oh, welcome. I have a couple of questions. First, from the Mayor's Office, I know this is a slightly different process in selection of a nominee than has been used in recent years. I wonder if you might speak to that.
Sure, Mr. Chair. The charter, when the charter was changed, the new charter, which isn't so new anymore, provided that Employee Relations Board members are selected and confirmed as all other city commissioners. The Administrative Code does have a requirement that they have labor expertise, some labor relations expertise, which is true of many of our other commissioners that have specific requirements in the code. Mayor Garcetti believes that the Employee Relations Board is one of his most important commissions and takes input from all kinds as to good commissioners. But the former process whereby there was a nomination and review process, he felt did not necessarily lead to better participants, and he is comfortable just making the appointments himself as provided by the charter.
So just to clarify, why is that process not necessary now?
It was necessary before. At one time it was in the code. The new charter provides that these mayoral appointees are commission appointees nominated by the mayor and confirmed by the council like every other commission. There is no special vetting process for these commissioners. Prior mayors chose to have a specialized vetting process for these commissioners. Mayor Garcetti decided not to follow that specialized vetting process because he felt like we could find good qualified commissioners without that specialized vetting process.
Now, the Employee Relations Ordinance requires that members of the board shall have broad experience in the field of employee relations. I assume that your office agrees with that part.
It's in the code, sir. Yes, sir. And we believe that our first nominee, Dr. Lugo, has just that.
Okay, and Dr. Lugo, I wonder if you could speak to that, your background and your experience in employee relations.
Of course. I am the first generation Mexican American. My parents were born in Mexico, and I was born here in the United States. I was raised in East Los Angeles and wanted to become a teacher, so I did. And as a teacher, I became a member of the United Neighbors. I became a teacher of UTLA, a member of UTLA. I'm currently a director with the Los Angeles Unified School District. I supervise 17 schools in LA Unified, and most of the schools are in the Los Angeles area. I was the principal at 68th Street School, where I supervised over 40 teachers and also classified staff. In my work as a director, I am part of the grievance process that union members take to appeal if they feel that there's unfair labor practice being practiced by the principals that I supervise. So I have been through that process. I've had the work of the manager as a principal and as a director, but I've also been a union member. I was on strike in 1989, 9 days on the picket line at 92nd Street as a teacher, so I know the importance of unions. And back in 1989, we were working for better work environments for educators and better wages. I have a healthy respect for the work of unions, and as an administrator, I hold myself and the principals I supervise to a higher standard. We are the district. We must follow policies and procedures. We must follow the contract. And if some of the people that I supervise do not follow the contract, then as a manager, I need to make sure that as I'm hearing the grievances from the employees, that we rectify that. So I received my doctorate from USC about 3 years ago. And in the course of taking my master's work and also as a doctoral program, I did take classes and courses at USC in the area of labor and human resources. I was also a community organizer for about 15 years, not only when I was a teacher, but also as a volunteer. And we formed partnerships with the union in areas, for example, when we're trying to raise the minimum wage. I was part of the Industrial Heirs Foundation, United Neighborhoods organization, back in the 80s and 90s, and we did a lot of work around family issues, raising the minimum wage and some of the other issues that we did. So I think I come with experience strong in union work and strong as a manager. As a manager in the Alley Unified, I feel that we have an obligation to ensure that the workers in our schools have the best environment so they could be productive, because if we have happy workers, then they're going to be good to the kids. If our teachers are in an environment where they don't feel that they're being respected, as principals, my job is to make sure that they are following the contract. So one of the advice that I tell the people that I supervise, the principals that I supervise, is have that open communication with your union chapter chair, because if you have open communication between management and the union, then many of the problems could be resolved. And if they're not, then we need to make sure that our principals are following the lead. So as a manager, I think I have a strong background in employee relations and labor relations, and also as a former union member in UTLA.
Mr. Llewellyn, do the appointees for this position have to be neutral?
They do not.
They do, according to the code, have to possess impartiality necessary to protect the public interest.
That's correct.
And I'm...
Mr. Chair, I think there is a difference between being fair and impartial and being a paid labor relations specialist. The code does not require paid labor relations specialists, does not require paid arbitrators, does not require paid hearing officers. And in fact, I think that would be a limiting factor in looking for high-quality membership. It does require knowledge of labor and fairness, and we believe, and the mayor very strongly believes, Dr. Lugo both has knowledge of labor issues and can be impartial and fair.
Okay, and obviously you recognize this is a slight departure from the previous process where generally people were professional in this arena when they came on the body.
That's correct.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I think I'm confused. I mean, according to the information that I find online from the city of Los Angeles, it sounds here as if they're supposed to be neutral. And so I'm wondering, is this information incorrect, or are we?
It is incorrect.
Okay, and so it also indicates that, and I absolutely appreciate your expertise. I'm sorry.
You need to be unfair.
I absolutely appreciate your expertise, and I think that you would do a tremendous job. But I guess where I'm a little concerned is that the departure from the previous process, it was that the nomination was done jointly by management and employee groups. Is that what the process was before you all changed it?
Yes, sir.
So is the process one? And I understand that from the mayor's perspective, he ultimately makes the nomination formal, but it's advanced as a result of this nomination process from labor and management. And so I guess where I would feel a little uncomfortable is that inherent, irrespective of the qualifications, I mean, I don't think that's at contention here, there is something real wholesome about having both the management and the labor forces sort of come together and do these nominations, and then they're advanced or not advanced by the mayor. I'm just wondering out loud why it is that we would not want to have that kind of conversation with both of those groups, given that the nature of this commission is going to be focusing on improving labor relations. Why wouldn't we do that?
Councilmember, we're very interested in the input of our labor partners. We've certainly talked to them about Dr. Lugo's nomination. We also are interested in the input of other people than just our labor partners, including our community partners. And we believe that we can get very strong, excellent nominees without going through a sort of formal nomination process. And the mayor, as that was a decision by prior mayors to choose to nominate that way, it was not in the code. It was not required in any way, shape, or form. It was just something mayors chose to do. The code does not require it. Just want to repeat one more time.
Well, and I think that's
this mayor decided not to, but he is still interested in the input of our labor partners, as to the commission has told them that.
I mean,
I've told them that.
being mindful of the code, I think is very important. But the benefit that we get from having a nomination process that brings together labor and management, I think there's something intrinsically valuable of that process, and it seems that we're short-circuiting a time-honored sort of recipe for ideally success. And I'm just wondering what it is that you all think makes your process or not having that nomination process better than, or rather not doing it makes it for better. Are we under some sort of time frame crunch, or what is it that
We were, with this particular nomination, there was a deadline, but the mayor feels comfortable that his process, and as a staff member, I'm certainly part of that process, of seeking broad input for all of our commission memberships is a working process that has resulted and will result in strong nominees across the board. In the same way that the planning department and the citywide planning commission has very important responsibilities, we need to ensure that they're qualified. In the same way that the civil service commission has strong nominees, we need to ensure they're qualified. And we believe that we are actually doing our best to seek broad input into getting good nominees that will actually serve the airport, serve the harbor, serve DWP, serve our employees in employee relations and civil service.
Any other questions? Mr. O'Farrell?
No questions.
Now, did this process change at some point? Was it changed around the charter? Was this ever a formal process in terms of...
My understanding is it had been in the prior charter. I cannot verify that. But obviously the new charter isn't so new anymore, even though we still call it the new charter around here. And again, mayors had chosen to follow that process. It wasn't an executive directive by the mayor. And Mayor Garcetti has rescinded that executive directive.
And as far as impartiality, can you make your own argument with your experience about why you would be a good choice from an impartiality standpoint?
I think the mayor has asked, and I'm a fair person. I listen to facts. I look at contracts. I look at codes, at city, for the district it would be policies, and decisions that are made have to be made based on those areas. And it's not made based on any biases that I could have or other forms of thoughts that detract from what's at hand. It's really about the city policies. It's really about the contracts and about looking at those facts that are being presented. I feel that I could be fair. I have a reputation of being an ethical and fair person and not one that is burdened with any other type of biases. I think that there's a responsibility on management side to create a good environment for the workers, and there's the contract that we have with our employees are important, and that we must make sure that, because they protect the workers' rights, and that's very important for me to ensure that that's being respected.
Thank you. We have a couple speakers from the public. Gavin Kuhn, to be followed by Cheryl Parisi.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Gavin Kuhn, I'm a business representative of Operating Engineers Local 501. I'm a sitting principal in the City of Coalition of Unions. I'm here to talk about two primary parts of this. One is that we were not consulted at all by the change. We've had a historic practice for many years on how the appointees or replacements are picked for the ARB. We were not consulted. As a matter of fact, Fred Horowitz had announced that he wanted to step down. We submitted 3 names per the process. I've been party to all along. There was no discussion with us. As far as we're concerned, this appointee came out of left field just for process, so you understand. I'm very, very concerned by the process because the ordinance is very clear. There has to be a field of interest as far as one is involved with this field. This is being on the ERB is not just more than a political appointee, which unfortunately seems like here. It is a position which you have to make legal judgment on case history, on calls, on hearing, on labor, not just administering a contract, but you have to make interpretation on legal issues in legal contracts. That's why the current officers, ERB officers, are all practicing professionals of the field. To put a non-professional, what I call professional acting is an impartiality, a neutral, into a position making decisions which impact both the city and both the unions and the workforce is, to me, frankly dangerous. And it's no disrespect against the candidate. I think she's got great qualifications. She seems like a wonderful person, but in this particular field, looking at her resume, she's not a qualified individual, and I would urge that we would re-examine that process and take another look at it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Cheryl Parisi.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much. I think the coalition unions have each signed on to a letter that was transmitted to each of your offices this morning, so I hope each of you have the letter. And
I'm sorry, I didn't get it.
oh goodness, I don't have a copy with me now.
I'll borrow I'm checking with the staff, and I haven't seen it. Okay, thank you.
So, essentially, our concerns are in 2 areas. The first being, and I obviously heard it covered, is the abandonment of a traditional selection process that literally has been in place as far as we can track back, we think, to the Doherty administration. We think in the late 60s when the Myers-Milius-Brown Act was adopted by the state legislature and the city enacted the Employee Relations Ordinance here in the city of Los Angeles and created the Employee Relations Board. Literally since that time, and I have personal experience, in this selection process going back through the Bradley administration. Literally since that time, there has been a bilateral process whereby the unions come together, nominate candidates. There are then meetings with CAO and management representatives, and 3 candidates who are mutually agreed upon by this bilateral process of labor and management are submitted to the mayor for selection. What's important to note about this selection process is that the selection process always complies with the standards in the Employee Relations Ordinance. And specifically what that means is that the nominees and the appointments to the Employee Relations Board have always been professional neutrals in the field of labor relations. Effectively, every member of the Employee Relations Board has been a professional arbitrator. They are neutral in every sense of the word and are professionals. Essentially what that means is that they are called upon to apply the precedents of law in the field of labor relations. National Labor Relations Board precedent, Public Employee Relations Board precedent, legal precedents emanating from the California State Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court. This is a judicial body, and the appointments have always reflected that very high level of professional and specialized professional expertise. And we are very concerned that this appointment, and again, I want to say absolutely no disrespect to the person who's been appointed the candidate, because this is really an issue about process and respecting the standards in the Employee Relations Ordinance as it relates to professional neutrals. I would also note that this
Yeah,
is...
I'll have to ask you to wrap up.
Okay.
Okay.
This is the only board that allows for appointments outside. There's not a residency requirement in the city of Los Angeles because it's an understanding that the candidate pool is obviously much greater. The other piece, of course, is that in recognition of the professional expertise, the fees that are paid to these professionals are equivalent to a daily rate for an arbitrator. And most importantly, this board has upheld some of the highest standards of labor law, kind of in our history, that has really allowed for and maintained a very high level of labor peace in the city of Los Angeles. The parties have faith in this process. The parties abide by the rulings of this board, and to move away from the high standards that have been in place for many years through many different mayors, I think is to undermine, to the city's detriment and to the goal of labor peace, to undermine that tradition, those standards, and ultimately our goal of ongoing labor peace and effective resolution of labor relations conflicts.
Now, do you see anywhere in any regulation that's currently in force that, apart from it being a good idea, that we actually have to have a professional mediator, a professional neutral in this position?
The language in the employee relations ordinance specifically states that they are experts in the field of labor relations and neutrals. And again, that's a specialized expertise. These are not experts in administration, supervision. They are experts in the specialized field of labor relations. And again, I define that for you. That's basically knowledge of the specific area of labor law and labor law precedents that would involve the rulings and determinations of this board.
Now, the wording I read is probably a little bit squishy, but it says the members of the board shall have broad experience in the field of employee relations. So while we might understand or think it's desirable for that to be the kind of professional expertise that they've had in the past, I'm not sure just on a reading of the actual wording that it's all that clear that that's what's required. In fact, it would just appear that they need to have broad general experience in that arena. And one could assume that this nominee has broad, even if not totally on-target experience.
Well, again, I think that this is a very highly specialized area, so that they would be asked to rule on impasse, whether the elements of impasse are present. And that, again, is relying on precedential decisions that would allow you to determine whether, in fact, an impasse exists in collective bargaining. That whether there's a demand for bargaining from the union, are the issues that are articulated by the parties within the mandatory scope of bargaining. If there is a request for unit determination or an amendment to an existing bargaining unit, what are the elements that would render a ruling of a community of interest, if this classification would go here or there. These are all specialized areas in labor relations, and so I would ask that any candidate would have broad and deep knowledge in these areas so that they render correct rulings that are trusted by the parties and that secures the kind of resolution of discord, resolution of differences in the labor relations field. This board has always been filled with some of the most eminent arbitrators in our area. The incumbent who is leaving because his term is over, Fred Horowitz, is the arbitrator for the national for baseball. He is the arbitrator that is selected by organized baseball in the United States of America, the Players Association, and the league. He's actually selected by the commissioner of baseball to arbitrate disputes in baseball. I mean, that's the caliber of candidate that we have. Chris Cameron Diaz was a nominee of President Obama to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. He was a nominee considered by Governor Jerry Brown to the California State Supreme Court. We have highly qualified experts in this field, and I would ask that this committee uphold those standards because, again, labor peace is at stake.
Thank you. Mr. Llewellyn, I wonder if I could ask you to respond to that in terms of how necessary it might be to have people of that caliber and expertise to be on that board.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember, the code says the qualification of members shall have broad experience in the field of employee relations and shall possess the impartiality necessary to protect the public interest. It does not, in fact, say they have to be professional neutrals. And it seems to me, ultimately, it is not in the code. I think it's not in the code because that is one type of experience that's useful for this commission. It is not the only type of experience. I believe you, council member, if and when you step down, would be qualified to be on this council, on this board, and you are not, in fact, a professional arbitrator for Major League Baseball, as much as you'd like to be. Professional arbitrators, professional people who are paid to do labor work is one kind of experience that probably gives them broad experience in labor. It may actually make them harder to be impartial because they often come from one side or the other. It is not the only kind of experience that gives you broad experience and the ability to be impartial. It's not required, and we actually think it's ultimately limiting to have only paid professionals on either the Employee Relations Board or the Civil Service Commission, to make them only paid professionals, and that's all they do. We actually think that's a limiting factor instead of an enhancing factor. We do believe that nominees should be supremely qualified. Dr. Lugo has had coursework at USC. She has her PhD, the first in her family to go to college, her generation. She, in fact, has hundreds of employees under her. She's risen through the ranks as a union member and as an administrator. She deals with labor stuff every day, and we consider her extremely well qualified and extremely able to be impartial. She 100% meets the test, and her experience, her background, her diversity will enhance that panel instead of bring it down. We strongly disagree with anyone who thinks that she will lower the standards of that body.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have got some questions. So I don't know if Mr. Llewellyn, you can answer the question, or if their clerk or the city attorney can, but can you give us the time constraints by which we have to act on this particular matter? Because I'm not prepared to vote for this item today.
Councilman, we do have a last date for council action, December 18, 2013. Technically, the time limit would be December 22nd, but we'll be in recess then.
So the 18th effectively is the date by which the council as a whole would have to act?
Yes, otherwise it's presumed to be approved.
Very good.
So, are you making it?
It's my understanding we're not going to meet again before recess.
I believe that is true. So, do you have a suggestion based on that fact?
I'm looking to my chair for some guidance here. What is
I mean,
your concern?
for me, this is somewhat of an awkward situation. I would say, certainly, if no one on this board had the kind of expertise that traditionally we've looked for, I think the board would definitely struggle. So, if there were a lot of appointees in the future that none of whom had the kind of expertise that somebody must have, I believe, for this board to function properly, I would probably go further. But with this particular appointment, it doesn't appear that it is legally required for them to have the kind of experience that traditionally they have had. It might not necessarily be my choice personally to go down this route. So had I run for mayor and taken on that responsibility, I might be doing it differently. But Eric Garcetti is the mayor, and I think he's looking out for the best interest of the city as well. And so on that basis, I will move to move this forward. And
Mr. Chair, I support that.
so why don't we have a roll call vote on this?
Councilmember Koretz?
Aye.
Councilmember O'Farrell?
Aye.
Councilmember Fuentes?
No.
Okay, so that will move forward to council with a 2-to-1 vote. Next item, item number 4.
Item number 4, motion, Carretzel-Farrell, relative to implementing changes to the Los Angeles Municipal Code to increase the number of cats that a city resident may own from 3 to 5.
And we have our general manager here, so I wonder if you could walk us through this item briefly.
Sure. My understanding, Brenda Barnett, General Manager, Animal Services. My understanding is that you would like us to recommend a program to increase the number of indoor altered cats that a person could have in their home. And we can study that, and I think there are some local models. There are some cat permits for even more than 5 cats. If we look at Laguna Beach, I think we can look at local models and we can come back with something that would be both sane and doable in the city.
Comments from
I have a comment.
members?
Just when you come back with the report, I have a suggestion, and that is to require proof of spay-neuter of the existing cats in the house
good
before
one.
they go to 5.
Absolutely. There's been some question about microchipping, too, about possibly requiring microchipping. So if they do get loose, we could find them and get them home.
That's another great point.
So you'll look at both of those?
Yes.
Okay, we have a number of speakers from the public, so we can hear them as well. Whitney Smith from the Riva Foundation, followed by Mary Catalano.
Clock's not moving.
Starts when you start.
Oh, hi, I'm Whitney, and there was some confusion about whether it was upping the limit to 5 being altered or not. There's a lot of internet confusion, so it would be great if that could be clarified. Ms. Barnett mentioned that they would be altered animals only, that we wouldn't be going from 3 to 5 with unaltered. So, because the city limit is 3, it's never been proposed beyond that, so we'd have to maybe amend that for clarity that if you have 5, those other 2 have to be fixed too, unless you have the medical exemption or a breeder permit. Also, I just want to mention that when this came up before, I wasn't able to go to the meeting, but Mary did. She maybe could speak to it, that the Landlord Association came out hard against this. I don't know whether you guys can just roll over them, because they made all sorts of complaints about how to bring down the property value, and even though they can say there's no cats in their building, which sort of makes it moot, but, you know, these are stupid people, so you got to address their concerns. I don't know how, I mean, obviously for homeowners it's not an issue, and for renters they're just out of luck, but I just think it just needs to be super clear that they have to be all spayed and neutered, and that maybe there could be some incentives for landlords to allow this great 5-cat thing, and maybe give them some sort of tax break or something. That's also been talked about for like 20 years, but it would be really cool because landlords are not going to like the idea of a 5, even if it's legal. So I'm for it, but it would be great if there could be some positive PR about it, about how we are killing so many cats. It's just staggering, and how we really, really need to let people have legally 5 cats to even hope for an adoption. We do adoptions every weekend. We haven't adopted a single kitten in a month. So thank you.
Thank you. And I think this was intended to deal with spay and neuter, so we'll make sure that that's looked at. Other than for medical conditions, I think the assumption has been that the additional cats would all be spayed and neutered.
Yes, I was just, again, we were not clear about the fact that the cats had to all be fixed, and we definitely want them all to have to be fixed. It's absolutely important they get fixed, and as a cat rescuer and adopter, I know that cats are being killed, massive amounts of cats are being killed at all times, so if people like cats, they should be allowed to have them and keep them and take care of them and love them, because it is horrendous how many cats are hated by people, and the ones that love them should love them. And spaying and neutering, of course, is definitely important. And of course, this would also exclude people trying to breed cats, so that would be fantastic to make sure that nobody is allowed to by law. And again, I'd like to the landlord thing would be awesome. Cats, when people have cats usually, they mostly use the litter box. I don't say that they always use the box, historically speaking. If they're ill, they may not. They're not usually likely to trash the apartment. More damage is done by children. So there are landlords who have a problem with cats, but people that take care of cats and love them, please allow them to have as many cats as they can under this 5-cat. Not as many cats, excuse me, the 5 cats at least. It would help save lives. Thank you.
Thank you. And of course, this doesn't require landlords to take any more cats. For example, we have a 3-cat limit now, but my landlord limits me to 2 cats, and we have 2 cats. So, can't tell exactly which item, but I believe Elizabeth Orrick is speaking on this item. So.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Elizabeth Orrick. I'm a national campaign manager with Best Friends Animal Society, and I'm just here to convey our support for this proposal. We have been proud and honored to partner with the city to operate the Mission Hill Shelter, to launch our NKLA Coalition. We've had huge success so far in increasing adoptions and lowering shelter killing, but the reality is that cats are still very, very challenged when they enter the shelters. So if we can increase the limits of altered, owned cats, it goes without saying that we can save more lives and get us closer to our goal of bringing LA to that no-kill status and really setting an example for other cities around the country to follow. Thank you.
Thank you. Phyllis Doherty, to be followed by Rich McClellan, who's our last speaker on this item.
Good afternoon, Phyllis Doherty with Animal Issues Movement, and I agree that if they must be sterilized, there must be proof of sterilization, and the microchipping is essential. I just want to address a little bit the issue of landlords, since I am a member of AGLA and very active in it, and I am a property owner. That's strictly the decision of the landlord, and of course there are a lot of reasons. Also, condominiums. I have a condominium. They won't allow more than 2 animals. So that is not something that you can just arbitrarily say it will be or will not be either way, but I think this is a great idea as long as those guidelines are followed. There are only a couple of things that I'm concerned about, and one of them is, what about the penalties? What is the penalty going to be? Someone has 5 cats and they say, no, I'm not going to spay or neuter. How do we handle that? We need to address that by financially, and then are we going to confiscate the animal, or what are we going to do? And I had something else here, but I can't read my own writing hardly. But that was the main thing, is that we think of everything before we do this. The other thing is breeders. We're absolutely not going to allow breeders to have 5, I assume, since they wouldn't be spayed or neutered. Again, we're going to have to be strict. The thing is the enforcement. How are we going to enforce this? The assistant general manager of the department announced to the commission at the last meeting that some days we don't even have 1 animal control officer out in the field per district. How are we going to do this? Well, there are a lot of things we need to think about.
Thank you. Mr. McClellan.
Yes, members of the Pause Committee. My name is Richard McClellan. I'm Director of the League of Humane Voters. I applaud this movement to allow people to have more cats than the current limit. I think that it's happening anyway in reality, and I think that the law hopefully will be just catching up with what the reality is. I'm here speaking because I would really like to offer a friendly amendment. It is a misdemeanor in this state to abandon your pet. And because of that, I would like to recommend that we add a mandatory microchipping as part of this. It would be just as enforceable as if you're going to go out and check whether they've been spayed and neutered or not. So if you're going to be out and making that check, microchipping does 2 things. Number 1, it assigns responsibility for a cat or a dog. So if that, by any stretch of the imagination, if one of those cats gets out and there is a complaint and animal control comes and gets the animal, they don't even have to go back to the shelter. They can scan that animal in the field and they can say it's a block away, and so I'm just going to go over and drop it off where it belongs. On the other hand, there also is a way of making sure that people who dump cats, and again, you would expect that people who want 3 to 5 cats wouldn't be be dumping their cats, but on the other hand, I know rescuers who have rescued dogs, found the dogs impossible to deal with, and have dumped them. And I don't deal primarily with cats, but I could certainly imagine the same thing would happen with cats. And we do need to do something about the number of feral cats that we have in this city and around the country. I think microchipping, again, would help us identify who do these cats belong to. Was it a lost cat, or was it actually a dumped cat? So I would hope that you would consider that amendment, and I would be glad to chat with anybody who is interested about microchips, why they're so useful, and why any progressive city should have their cats microchipped. Thank you.
Thank you. And we will ask that the general manager come back with a report that takes into account all the good suggestions that we've gotten today, along with what we had previously, and come back to us with that. So we will move that without objection.
So are we sending that to council or holding it in committee, Councilman?
I'll let the general manager tell us what she thinks what's the better way to do it. Do you want to just forward it to council, or do you want to bring it back to committee first?
Well, we need to take it before our Board of Animal Commissioners first.
And do you want to bring it back to committee after that?
Yes.
Okay, so let's do it that way. So we'll refer it to the Board of Animal Commissioners and then back to the committee, if we are able to do that.
Well, we'd either have to hold it here and let the Department of Animal Services do its processes, or
Let's do it that way then.
Okay.
We'll hold it here, come back with a report, take it to commission, and then bring it back to us. Okay, now I had item 3 on consent, but since we have a couple speakers on item 3, we will take that up briefly. So.
Item number 3, CAO report relative to proposed modification of the Apollo project to expand mobile spay and neuter services for pit bull and pit bull mixed breed dogs in Pacoima and Sylmar.
As long as we're doing this item, why don't we have staff walk us very briefly through this item.
Sure. Brenda Barnett, Animal Services. This is a very generous grant from the Heigl Foundation to help us spay and neuter pit bulls out in Sylmar and Pacoima. And we were not moving this along on the appropriate timeline and actually using the funds because we couldn't get enough pit bulls scheduled for the surgery. So in meetings with Jennifer, who'll probably want to speak to this, and with former council member Alarcon, we decided to keep the money in Sylmar and Pacoima because of the need, but we were also going to work on some public outreach, and of course it was at the end of the term, so I've just come to put in a pitch for our current council member Fuentes to ask for his support and help in the community with this. I think you have the connections with some of the people we need to get the word out to help with this.
Hi, this is Jennifer Brent from the Heigl Foundation. We would definitely like to extend the opportunity to offer the free sterilizations within CD7, but allow other mobile clinics to take advantage of those services so that we can use up some of the $50,000 that we've donated in order to help stem some of the tide of unwanted pit bulls coming into the shelters.
Now, was some of the problem that you couldn't get enough at a time to make it worth the trip,
Right.
or what exactly was the problem?
Yeah, the Amanda Foundation was doing a great job out there, but their percentage of pit bulls wasn't large enough, and that's what the grant is for. So they might have a full day of surgery, but they weren't using the grant fund for the pit bulls.
The grant started in 2010, and to date we've used like $32,000 of that. Of the total, the Animal Sterilization Trust Fund put in another $30,000. So of a total of $80,000, only $32,000 has been spent in the last 3 years. We'd like to see more of that spent so we can certainly sterilize more pit bulls.
Absolutely.
Part of what we'd like to see is a marketing push that goes along with any of these new mobile clinics that come in. What Ms. Austin from the Amanda Foundation let us know is that a lot of the people in the community that this grant is targeting are not even aware that it exists. So we'd like to make that as a part of the amendment.
Okay, and I assume the council office affected might want to have something
I do.
to say about this.
I'm actually very excited about the program. I was unaware of it until I saw it agendized, and so I had a couple of questions. It seems that the program is targeted to the neighborhoods of Pacoima and Sylmar solely. So does that mean that that somebody in Lakeview Terrace or other parts of CD7 would be unable to avail themselves of the service?
That's correct. When the original grant was written, it was those two zip codes were selected because they contribute disproportionately to the number of pit bulls and pit bull mixes that are euthanized in city shelters. At one point, about a year and a half ago, we looked to amend the grant so that it was applicable to all of Los Angeles City. At that point, Councilmember Alarcon spoke on and decided that he would prefer to keep it in CD7. We agreed to do that, and we've been looking at ways to spend more of that money. And we're hoping that if more mobile providers can come in, that we'll be able to get more animals sterilized.
And so the coordination between the mobile providers, so you all essentially have the money to pay the mobile providers.
Correct.
It's a matter of partnering with the mobile providers and bringing awareness to Pacoima and Sylmar.
These are 100% free sterilizations. They're just zip code based. They're not income based. So we're hoping that that will provide an open forum for those people who most need those services to come and take advantage of them.
So if I'm a resident of Pacoima and I have a terrier, how do I get the service? I mean, do I go onto the website? Do I call your foundation? How does a resident participate?
You would call the clinic that's servicing that area for that day, and thus far it's been Amanda Foundation. Make your appointment, and you would show up with a proof of residency.
Okay, very good. And so you have to demonstrate the zip code proof. Okay, very good. And when can we meet to go ahead and make sure that we're successful? Because you say that there's about 18,000 left to...
Oh, no, there's close to 50,000.
Oh, boy. All right, well, let's get to work. Wow. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Brenda, I'll be in touch. We'll figure out how to coordinate a couple of events. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And we have a few speakers on this, and this sounds great. Obviously, your office working with them could help a lot to identify where they are and get the word out. Phyllis Doherty, to be followed by Terry Austin, and then Mary Catalana.
Phyllis Doherty with Animal Issues Movement. There are 3 L's, Councilman Fuentes, that you need to remember with this type of thing. We've done this in the county in El Monte, and I'll tell you about that. But the things are the limit. They must be held to the limit of 3 dogs. They must be licensed, and they must be leashed. And unless you put that entire thing in place, this won't be successful because it will not reach the people that you really want to. The ones that are involved in underground dog fighting will continue to breed. They will continue to sell off the pups that are not game. That's the purpose of breeding pit bulls. You get a very large litter, 10 to 13 puppies usually. Approximately 3 of those, and you can usually determine by 3 weeks of age pretty well which ones are going to be game enough to fight. Then you're left with 7 to 10 puppies, so they just sell them off in the community. They may not exhibit extremely aggressive tendencies, but they carry the bloodline for fighting. So the goal is either to keep them unspayed or unaltered, because then if the dog that does win over here is a sibling in any way to this dog is carrying that bloodline, they can still make money off of breeding it. So this is much more serious than just people's pets. That's why it hasn't worked in El Monte, why it hasn't decreased the number of pit bulls that are coming in. If you combine it with the limit, if you have the officers out there and they're enforcing the leash laws, the limits, and the licensing on it, and you have the officers working out there at the same time talking to the residents and saying, where are the problems? Who's doing the dog fighting? Who's causing the problem out here? Then it'll help. Maybe Jose can help with this, the people that are out and actually walk the areas for it. This is a very serious thing. That was with Councilman Alarcon.
Oh, he's no longer with the office.
No, but he's out now. He has a 501c3 for spay and neuter out there, and they're out walking the district. So the problem is that the reason there are only 23 done is because they don't want the pit bulls spayed or neutered for the most part, because they can make money from them. I'll work with you on it.
Thank you. Terry Austin.
Terry Austin, the Amanda Foundation. The Amanda Foundation has been a vendor for the city since 2001 for spay and neuter, and our mobile clinic is the most successful in the country for the spay and neuter work that we do, which is primarily large breed dogs and dogs more than cats. Most mobile clinics concentrate on cats. Dogs are much more expensive to do and much more time consuming. So we're really proud to say that we do a lot of dogs. And we're often in twice a month at the Target at Laurel Canyon and Osborne. And then we've recently been working with Guardian Angel School for the last several months, trying to get into that community where the projects are and deal with pit bulls in that area. And as was stated, when the money was given to the department, there was no marketing plan included. There was no part of that money set aside to let the public know, so there were no flyers or banners or anything to let anybody know. We invested a little bit of our gold into doing that, and the city put out some flyers for a period of time, and the Heigl Foundation initially put out a few flyers. But that's really been the problem. So I'm all in support of letting other organizations access that money. It was allocated for the Amanda Foundation to use so that the money could have some vendor to use it up, because the city had no other way to use the money that was given to them. So we agreed that we would use it, but without a marketing plan and without outreach, nobody knows about the program. So I'm totally in support of other organizations using it. And I'd really look forward to meeting with Councilman Fuentes and Councilman O'Farrell, because the spay-neuter problem in both of your districts is significant, and we're already working at Pacoima a good deal, and in Sylmar. And I've just recently been down at the Riverwalk, which is just beautiful down, and looking at Oro and Barclay and all those streets down there, and found a great little community center that wants the Spaymobile to come there. So if you can make it, your deputies available, I'd love to take a meeting with both of your offices.
You got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And last speaker, Mary Catalano.
I want to thank everybody that's involved in raising funds and trying to make it better by getting money for these spay-neuter programs, and the fact that pit bulls and pit bull mixes are included. I really appreciate that. That's fantastic. I just want to thank everybody for that. Also, I just wanted to mention that there's some funding somewhere. Someone must have some funding for PR to try and get it out to the public, try and influence the public that it is the best thing to do, that it's the right thing to do. There are certain cultural elements in these areas that they think it's macho not to let your dog not be neutered, and that is a sin, and it's very devastating and sad. And it's very hard to educate people that have that in their mind about it. If there's anyone that can get involved in the PR, that would be really appropriate and fantastic, because it is such a devastation that these animals are killed. Also, that is, as a cat rescuer mainly, I have a lot of people that request spay and neuter for that area. If that could be included at some point by some funding, that would be fantastic. And also, what was I going to say? This is an area I hope that is also covered by the spay-neuter ordinance of Los Angeles. Are these covered? I believe, okay. So that is the word has to be get out, the culture has to be educated, and the residents of those areas about the devastation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And if there's no other comments from members, we'll approve the CAO's recommendation to extend the Apollo project service agreements to other mobile spay and neuter operators. So hearing none, that is approved. Item number 5.
Item number 5, continued from February 5th, 2013, City Attorney and Department of Animal Services reports and ordinance relative to modifying the definitions of dog kennel, cat kennel, and pet shop in LMAC Section 53.00 and amending the guidelines for issuing a pet shop permit in LAMC Section 53.50E. This item's also been referred to the Planning and Land Use Management Committee and waived out of said committee.
And do we have someone to speak to this item? Please.
Members, my name is Dov Lassell, Assistant City Attorney. The ordinance before you is essentially a companion piece to one that you adopted that the council adopted almost a year ago, outlawing pets being sold from pet stores unless they were obtained from animal shelters, ASPCAs, or rescue organizations. This will allow, because from those sources, oftentimes the animals are older than 3 months old. We had on our books a definition of kennel that says that 4 or more dogs over the age of 4 months constitute a kennel. And kennels are only by right in manufacturing areas, essentially. It became extremely difficult for existing pet stores or new pet stores to be able to go along with the ordinance to switch from puppies or kittens that were brought in from breeders to puppies and kittens that come from shelters, etc. What this ordinance does is it makes that possible by exempting pet shops from the kennel definition. It also does two things. It makes sure that the pet shops themselves, when they get permitted, that the department will look at them to make sure that by permitting a pet store that has adult animals, that this will not become a problem in the community or to the neighborhood. And it also makes sure that pet stores cannot, on the side, breed animals. So they will not be kennels. They will be retail pet shops. And the department will be given enhanced powers to, if you will, to issue a permit taking into account matters to limit the dog numbers, for instance, and take whatever steps is needed in the permit so that this does not become a problem in the neighborhood.
Members, any questions or comments?
I have a quick comment, and that is, I think anything that enables the City of Los Angeles to make animals in need more available to our communities in areas that previously might have had a pet store is good for the cause. And I know other cities do it, just not Los Angeles. So I think we need to get in the game. And I think that with proper regulation, as you mentioned, then we could be on our way to something really good. So thank you.
And we have one speaker from the public, Phyllis Doherty.
Phyllis Doherty, Animal Issues Movement. First of all, you need to find out how many pet stores have requested this, because my understanding is that none have. This was a favor by Mr. Bickhart, and Mr. Kretz knows this was not part of the first ordinance. He tried to bring this in as a separate item and have it passed at the same time. This is much more serious than just a few dogs. Rescuers can bring dogs now all day long to pet stores and offer them for adoption. That's not the issue. This is the issue of boarding those animals 24 hours a day in stores that might be right next to your council offices, might be next to a restaurant. Ms. Barnett is not qualified. She's not a county health person. She's not a building and safety expert. That's what the conditional use permit process is for. This is just an effort to circumvent the law. The conditional use permit is what evaluates whether or not, by the experts, by the code enforcement people, planning, and by county health, whether or not this will be a hazard. When you have a lot of adult dogs urinating and defecating in a small area with no kennel drainage, you can't just have a kennel anywhere. You can't decide to have a kennel in your house. You have to have the proper drains to get that bacteria and virus out of there. There are diseases that get on the skin. They're airborne. There has to be an air circulation system that meets requirements to keep the animals well. This is a very, very serious issue. This is a major hazard to any business owner and to anyone that frequents any location where you have adult dogs put in a small area that's not a kennel. That's why you have indoor-outdoor kennel areas at your shelters. This is very serious. This should not be done. It's needless. No one is asking for it. Even the person that initiated it doesn't want it anymore. And Ms. Barnett mainly is not qualified. We've already been in touch with county health. They're appalled at this. Where are her health and safety certificates, her licenses, and where has she become a planning expert so that she can decide what's a hazard to the neighbors?
Thank you. Elizabeth Orrick.
See, that's why I tried to consolidate them all in one card, so you wouldn't get confused. Elizabeth Orrick from Best Friends Animal Society, again, here in support of the ordinance as defined by Mr. Lascelles. The council has already taken the first step to solve the puppy mill crisis in Los Angeles by enacting the ordinance to prohibit the retail sale of dogs, cats, and rabbits in pet stores, and we were proud and honored to be a part of that process. That's already having a significant impact on the number of animals being imported from mills into our city from out of state, many of which are sick and end up surrendered to our taxpayer-subsidized shelters. The second step is to make it possible for stores to alleviate the burden on those shelters by getting dogs and cats out of the shelters and into pet stores where they can be seen by more potential adopters and thus find more homes. Adoption pet stores are very popular and can be very viable as a profitable business model. I have never heard of any of the problems that Ms. Doherty just talked about in any of the hundreds and even thousands of pet stores that are doing adoptions across the country. So I'd like to see some of the data on that. So we do support this redefinition of kennel to allow pet stores to continue finding homes for animals in shelters, alleviating the burden on taxpayers who subsidize those shelters. The city has already gone the distance on this, so we just need to go a little bit further to cross the finish line and make this the truly effective and impactful ordinance it was meant to be. Thank you.
Thank you. No more speakers. Any comments by members? If not, without objection, this item passes. Next item, item 6.
Item number 6, motion O'Farrell Koretz relative to the status of and structure and operational activities of the Animal Cruelty Task Force.
And Mr. O'Farrell, this is your motion, so if you'd like to speak to it.
Yeah, and I think we're going to just continue this, but I would like to see a written report along with the verbal report. I just want to put that on the record. Yeah. Good, Harry? Thank you, sir.
So you're asking that we continue this item? Come back with a written report. So without objection, this item will be continued.
Thank you.
Item number 7.
Item number 7, motion O'Farrell Koretz Lavange relative to the feasibility of outlawing the use of animal traps or snares that maim, kill, or cause inhumane suffering.
And this is your item as well? So
Yes,
if you'd like to speak to it?
And on this one, I would like maybe to ask the city attorney, I would like this ordinance fast-tracked and to be adopted before the year's end, before council goes on recess. Is that possible?
Normally, we wait for city council to give us direction, so this would have to go into council first. And then it's simply a matter of timing. I try to turn ordinances around quickly. To the degree that we can try to get this back to council before the council recess. Obviously, I can't make promises as to when the council will act on this and how long it will take my office process. It seems pretty straightforward, at least on an initial read.
Thank you. Then, Mr. Chair, I move that we get this to the full council at the earliest possible convenience.
Without objection, that is what we will do.
Thank you.
Item number 8.
Item number 8, City Planning Department report and CAO 2 report relative to request for substitute authority for one Deputy Director of Planning pursuant to the Department of City Planning Department Personnel Ordinance, Ordinance number 1822414. Subsequent to the release of this agenda, we have also received a report from the CAO.
Good afternoon.
Welcome.
Tyler Munhall, CAO. Would you like me to walk through the report?
Please.
Okay.
Why don't you do that?
The Department of City Planning requested a substitute authority for an AGM level position because the incumbent is retiring February 14th. So the department requested the substitute authority so that there would be the availability to have somebody in place to learn from the existing incumbent and to be in the position and handle the duties of it until a permanent replacement employee could be hired. Starting this year, council set a policy that it will approve substitute authorities that are not for layoff avoidance. The CAO approves them for layoff avoidance, and also the CAO provides a report to council on substitute authority requests, which is why you have a report from us. In general, substitute authorities are for temporary, short-term staffing issues. Things like if somebody goes on long-term or a longer-term sick leave, or to correct to meet peak workloads, correcting position classifications, or layoff avoidance. Planning has requested an authority that would run from now until June 2014, which our office wouldn't consider short-term. The position would, the substitute authority is essentially an unbudgeted additional authority. So it's like hiring two people. So the cost of the substitute authority through June would be about $107,000. It's $13,496 approximately per month. And in our report, we lay out some alternatives that we recommend departments follow, from making sure before the employee leaves to assign their duties to the existing executive team, to doing and having the incumbent employee do an exit report so the knowledge that they have is transferred and available to the department. And also, once the position is vacated and before a permanent is hired, the general manager has the ability to put somebody in the department in that role as acting. So there are a number of steps that departments can take when this happens, and it happens frequently. Normally, we don't authorize substitute authorities for this type of problem, staffing problem. So for these reasons, there is one additional budgetary impact because of the cost. The position is funded by the general fund, so that would reduce any potential savings the department might have that would revert to the general fund at the end of the year. Because we have a budget shortfall, that's another reason we're recommending that the department use these mitigating approaches rather than authorizing a substitute authority.
Now, you typically would use it for things, as you said, like extended sick pay if somebody was ill. Why is that any different than the circumstance where somebody is retiring and go on vacation before they're retiring?
Well, in this situation, so you know that the person's going to retire. The department is well aware of that, so they have time to plan for it. Whereas if somebody goes on sick leave, it might be a very short notice situation. The other thing is they can appoint somebody as acting, so that's one other mitigating factor, and they can also have the existing executive team handle that work, which they typically do. Like if the person goes on vacation or something like a long vacation, those duties get either delegated down or to other members of the executive team.
Now, the CAO, I think, has said that the general manager should deny the request from the retiring employee to use compensated time off because the request caused gaps in coverage. Why is that? I mean,
so
that seems like a somewhat unfair approach as well.
Well, what it does is it creates a gap between when the incumbent is actually actively working and when their actual retirement date happens. So there's additional time added where the position is essentially vacant. On the payroll, the person's still on the payroll, so the position can't be filled. And I'm not saying this is the situation with planning, but it is possible to allow the employee to use sick time which would otherwise be paid out at 50%, and instead it would be paid out at 100%. So it's just it's bad practice to allow that gap to happen or for extra expenses to happen. And again, I'm not saying that's what planning is doing. It's just we wanted to kind of outline the general procedures that should be followed.
I wonder if we could have the general manager come up and give his point of view on this as well.
Good afternoon, council members. Michael LeGrand for the record. Thank you for having me, and thank you to the CAO's office for working with us on this request. This is a unique situation we find. Eva Juan McDaniel, our deputy director, is over administration, our budget, technology, IT, things such as ZEMIS, our case tracking, and our performance numbers, as well as nuisance abatement, revocation. Our newly created condition compliance unit is retiring. The maximum number of days she plans on taking off is 3 days. There is no extended vacation time, and in terms of sick leave, she wouldn't be doing any type of behavior that would be sick leave beyond anything that would normally happen if you get sick and contract a cold or something such as that. So I wouldn't have someone in an executive level position. I don't think Tyler was saying that, but that would perform in a way that would abuse the city payroll system in that manner. So that's not even really at issue. What we're trying to do is be able to get someone in place, go through a quick interview process to interview many times city employees that could take on this role and responsibility. Because this person will be over about a $38 million budget, very technical IT issues, it's not something a normal planner that I have in my department I could transfer that to and say, Mr. Bell, I want you to handle this task. Although he may be able to eventually, there's a certain gap there that we're trying to avoid. So what we're really trying to do is get someone in to utilize Eva's over 20 years experience in the city to be able to step in and work alongside Nextdoor to kind of understand our accounting, our procedures, our budget process. We've also recently loaned to the mayor's office our senior budget analyst, who is our chief budget operator for our department, the highest level administrative person we have besides Eva, to the mayor's office as the head of their budget. So for me to give someone Eva's duties would be Matt. Matt's on loan to the mayor for an infinite amount of time as we get through the new performance-based budgeting, so I don't really have somebody to transfer those assignments to. And another planner at a lower level really wouldn't fulfill those duties the same as what I'm looking for, someone who has a more of an analytical background as well as an IT background, and also a humanistic management approach that we're trying to employ in the planning department. So we wanted an opportunity to kind of hit the ground running, bring someone in, work alongside Eva. The June date was kind of forecasted out, assuming managed hiring. Our experience has been that managed hiring takes a number of months to get through at best, and we're hoping that that can be expedited. So we're asking for June the latest. I'd be happy to amend the request to be no later than June, and as soon as managed hiring is approved and someone's in place, or create some language with the CAO that would basically not have to go to June if we were able to get somebody in place and get the managed hiring authority. I can't even begin the interview process until Eva's vacated from the position, which is in February, and then start the interview process from that date. That's a few months out. Get that person in place. They probably won't start for a few weeks because they have to leave their last employer, and then have them in place. We're trying to avoid that large gap, and then assuming we also got through managed hiring during that time, but we can't even begin that process until we have managed hiring. So this is a way for us to kind of expedite that process while we go through managed hiring, take care of a training need, and also make up for the gap that we have losing our senior budget analyst. I'm available for any questions and to explain it more. It seemed rather simple when we requested it. There wasn't a procedure laid out by the CLA. The day this was waived out of committee and went to City Council, we got a letter from the CLA establishing a procedure. So we're kind of the guinea pig going through this process. So we understand it's a little bit awkward, the request, but we're trying to do our diligence to make sure we can manage the affairs of the department without having a major gap that can be avoided.
Any questions, colleagues?
You mentioned CLA. Did you mean CAO in terms of sort of the process that they've outlined here?
Yes, actually the CLA was transferred to them in the budget last year, so the process was new for us to go through. So that was the CLA who sent the letter with a new procedure to get a report from the CAO.
And I'm just curious from the CAO's perspective, in the report that's dated November 18th, there's a path that you all suggest in order to accomplish this, and it seems like it notwithstanding the managed hiring committee process, which seems to take up a big chunk of the time, what's your estimation that it would take to do all of this?
To do our
So-
mitigating?
Well, no, you say here that, is not the most cost-effective or efficient approach, and you suggest to prepare and submit to the CAO a request to fill form. You suggest requiring the retiring employee to put together a report, et cetera, et cetera. What's your guess as to how long that would take, and including the managed hiring committee process?
So with managed hiring, let me speak to that first. There's nothing that precludes the department from submitting the request now so that it can be reviewed by the analyst. And that's why I put this in here, so that the day the person retires and the position is vacant, MHC can look at the report and the comments from the budget analyst and the CAO.
Sure.
So that's
I guess let's say I work for you.
Sure.
And I do, because I'm a public servant. And I notified you that I'd like to retire. And if I start your process and sort of go through it, at what point are you actually going to sort of get to a place to hire my replacement if we follow each of these steps here?
Well, certainly the non-MHC steps can be done relatively quickly, and
Sure.
within a week or so. So, I mean, when somebody goes on vacation, it doesn't take a long time to do that process. Probably the exit report is going to take the person a week or two to complete. And then the MHC process, we're advocating that they just front load the actual form, and then MHC will know that it's a high priority, so they could certainly choose to act on it either at their next meeting or interim.
Sure. But in your experience, let's say we put the request in today because we're, top notch. When will the MHC process sort of spit out? What's your sort of...
I would think that MHC would be able to look at the request within a week or so after the person vacates the position.
After the person vacates the position, okay. Yeah, I guess my concern is that, I think it's a good process, but given the specific sort of nature of where the department is, and you made the comments earlier about sort of going through this process, and I think if we were, as a city, completely and totally staffed, then you would have an ability to delegate and that sort of thing. But I'm a big believer in sort of finding who it is that's going to be the replacement, shadow that person, and go as you can, and keep them as long as possible as soon as they've said that they're leaving. And I'm sure this individual is a great person, but once you've made the decision to leave, you start leaving pretty quickly. And so I'd be happy to move the measure actually giving the general manager the subject authority, the substitute authority to find the replacement as soon as possible.
We will consider that then. I'll let you say
what you're going to say. One thing to consider is not, because these are supposed to be short-term, June seems an inordinate amount of time for the substitute authority to run through. So something more along the lines of a month would be more appropriate for a substitute authority.
But let's factor in, we're done in November. December is very difficult, I think, to sort of get, and it's not a good excuse, but it just is practice that we don't get anything really done in December, it seems like, at least the paperwork side of things. So I feel comfortable making the exception to the rule here, understanding how important this particular department is to making sure that we're getting workflow from engineering and building and safety and everywhere else. This is one of those cogs that is very, very important, and we have too much delay as it is in the system, which is why we ought to figure out how to streamline all this, but that's a separate conversation.
And I will take your motion, and this item will be deemed passed by the two of us who are present unanimously, 2-0.
Thank you.
Thank you both. And lastly, we have one speaker from the public under public comments. Phyllis Doherty.
Good afternoon, Phyllis Doherty. I just checked my articles for today, and my Pitbull article has 3.6 1,000 likes. I can do one on a golden retriever and get 10. So that's what you're up against with pit bulls, unfortunately. I think and so you'll understand that I do write about what goes on here. It's nothing personal. I happen to like you all very much. But I write the truth, I document everything, and I hate the fact that it reaches 7,000 to 10,000 people in the city, and they know about it too, because I'd much rather that we did things according to the law and according to the best interest of the public, which was very important in one instance, and yet in another instance it's not. So maybe pretty soon we'll have people spraying their cars next door to restaurants too. I want to let you know that I just got this text. Petition site replace Brenda Barnett with a more effective general manager of LA Animal Services. So somebody just texted this to me that's up now. You have a $21 million budget in this department. We don't have one officer in the street on a lot of the districts, according to the general managers, the deputy general manager. You have some serious issues in this department. I will pretty soon have the exact figure, but I'd say it's probably very close to $1 million right now that has been wasted on administrative leave to take our employees out of their positions on some reason. The Pizzagate thing, the vending machines, which we now have no vending machines in our shelters at all for cold drinks or anything, because Ms. Barnett wanted to accuse them of something that was illegal. $500,000 later, they all came back. There was nothing illegal. They were following policy, which she didn't bother to check. You have some serious management problems in this department, and you're going to see them more and more. Luckily, under the law, even the appeals court, now people are being allowed to actually sue the general managers of animal control agencies for nonfeasance or not of their malfeasance of their positions. So we're looking at a different thing because animals do affect people a lot.
Thank you. And there being no further business, we are adjourned.